Welcome to Wealth Well Done. Together, we'll cover a wide range of important topics surrounding money and the impact it has on our lives. From the sophisticated and highly valuable planning techniques of the ultra-wealthy to the commonly underutilized biblical teachings. Together, we'll work to improve our relationship with money and our effectiveness in stewarding it well. Here's your host, Eric Scovill.
All right, welcome to the 78th episode of the Wealth Well Done podcast, where we are going after tactical, practical, and biblical ways to help you do your wealth well done. Last week we did I guess more than a few weeks ago, last episode, we did a deeper dive into estate planning. Took a few weeks off here just from workload, but back at it. This week we're going to be looking at what it looks like to be a biblically responsible investor. We are going to absolutely be talking about investments here, so I want to make sure we do the disclaimer that says that none of this is actually financial advice for you. This is meant to be informational, educational, and I hope you take this to do your own research, talk to your own financial team about this, and decide what actually works best for you. Anything we talk about from a return standpoint would only be from the past, and certainly does not indicative of any type of future results there or any guarantees. That said, this is also the first recording we've done since the election. And so depending on where you stand on that could have been a very positive thing for you. I'm guessing that most of the listeners here would probably assume that or find that election results positive. I certainly did, but I also want to draw attention to a few key things with that. First and foremost, Donald Trump is not the savior, nor is the Republican Party. I heard one person say, I thought this was really good. He said, I didn't vote for Donald Trump, but I voted against policies that were anti-biblical. And I thought that was a good way of looking at this. Obviously, many people have a problem with Donald as a person, and even though there's lots of prophecies about him and other things, there's certainly issues there. No one's denying that, but hopefully he has the strength and continues to pursue what the Lord is looking like he is doing in his life and through this presidency. So I want to encourage Christians to continue to really lean in and pray for him, pray for the leaders of this country on both sides of the aisle, but be praying about this. And if you were praying hard for the election or before the election, please don't stop. God is moved by the prayers of his people, and we need to continue praying because the work really hasn't even begun yet. The work is getting ready to get started here right now. So we need to keep praying for that. As we look at the market and the economy, I've heard many people talk about the idea that they think that we're in the clear now. The economy was very fragile before, but now that inflation seems to be coming down, at least that's what we hear. And as inflation is coming down, and now that Trump's in office, then therefore, take all of the concerns away and let's go back at it. Everything's good. Have a number of people want to get more aggressive in their portfolios as well. And I just want to say that although some signals are definitely pointing that way, to not get too comfortable there because we're still in a really hard spot no matter who is president. As we look at what's going on with inflation and interest rates and where we stand with our debt as a country, we're in a very bad position. Lose all around here. You cannot control inflation while working with our debt and the interest that we owe on our debt. If we let inflation, or if we let the economy boost back up, we drop interest rates, which is something that as an investors love seeing interest rates drop. We love seeing that because that drives up the prices of real estate and other things there. That's great. Donald Trump has made it clear that he's always a fan of lowering interest rates. Not always, but he's a fan of lowering interest rates. But what that does is that causes the economy to burn hotter. We can't afford to increase interest rates like they did when they were fighting inflation in the late 70s there. If we do that, like our country is so indebted that we would be insolvency. We're not too far from that as we stand now. So a big increase in interest rate wouldn't work without any type of major intervention coming into play here. So I would say that we still have turbulence ahead. Again, obviously Trump is talking about kind of flipping the world upside down or flipping our government upside down and shaking out all the things that don't really belong in there too. And that the ripple effect of that is big. And if you are on the left wing of this, then, and many major corporations are, they probably don't just roll over and bow out without a fight. And so I don't want to pretend like I have all the answers to that, but I do just want to encourage people to expect turbulence. The Bible talks about some of these kings who did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, but they didn't tear down all the high places, or in the rare case where they did tear down the high places. That's just one sentence in the Bible, but that is, if you put some thought into what it would mean to go in and tear down the high places inside our economy or inside our culture, um, you're talking about major destruction and divide. And so I just want people to have their eyes kind of open to what we're potentially looking at. Hence the reason to really continue to lean into prayer and fasting and praying for our country and for the world here. Asset wise, where it makes sense, certainly the stock market is obviously the place where most people are invested. Obviously, the stock market is a place where most people are invested, but even inside the stock market, or preferably even outside of it, looking at hard assets is a great place to be when you're concerned about inflation and concerned about the durability of an economy or the durability of the U.S. dollar. So precious metals are good there. Gold is pretty strongly inversely related to the strength of the U.S. dollar. It's seen a little dip here as of late, but I still think that with inflation being as real of a concern as it is, we're looking at precious metals to be an important part of portfolios. Again, do your own research to decide if that's actually a fit for you or not. But switching into what we wanted to talk about today here, there's been a trend. It's a large growing trend, and it started a handful of years ago with what most people are probably aware of with ESG. And so this is called socially responsible investing. ESG was something that got heavily pushed throughout all 401ks and other investment portfolios. The managers doing this, and it was under the premise of, these are things that are good for the environment. But what they also carry with it were some pretty strong social activism and politically charged investments, and that created a conflict of interest there, where the investment managers were not necessarily doing what was in the best interest of the investor. They were serving a different need. They're serving a different master, to be quite frank. But as of late, we have seen a strong growth in what's called biblically responsible investing. So I want to get in and talk about that. Our investments matter. You can vote with your dollars. You saw what happened with Bud Light when they had Dylan Mulvaney on there as a transgender person representing their branding, and they took a massive drop there. I think they lost $27 billion in value, saw their U.S. market shares cut in half. And so they had this major backlash from that. Target had a pretty similar result when they had their satanic memorabilia, as well as the tuck swimsuits and other things. So when they took their strong stance of where they were going, the U.S. economy and the U.S. Retail world pushed back. And so you can vote with your dollars there. Good way to look at this is you've got places that invest into places like Planned Parenthood. And so if you are of a Christian faith, but you are investing in companies, whether you're investing in companies or buying from companies that are heavily invested, or that not necessarily heavily, but that donate to Planned Parenthood, you got to realize that you're voting with your dollars there. And so there is there is a list. I'm on the Partners for Ethical Care. It's partnersforethicalcare.com. And on there, one of the things they have is a list of Planned Parenthood donors. This one's actually from 2019, but the list of companies on here is dramatic, from 3M and Adobe to American Airlines and United Airlines, and you keep going all the way down. A lot of the largest banks are in here, a lot of software companies. You've got things you wouldn't expect, like a Dollar General, but Dollar Shave Club and eBay and Expedia and Frito-Lay. You can go on down, General Mills here, and keep going. Home Depot. I'm just grabbing a few of these as they pop out of me. But there's so many companies on here that are listed as having donated to Planned Parenthood that year. Also, the National Basketball Association, the NBA, the NFL, the NCAA, Old Navy, Pizza Hut. You got all these different companies that are in organizations that have donated to Planned Parenthood. And if you really want to use your dollars to speak, I would suggest that you take a strong look at that. Even things like Walmart and YouTube, and how far are you willing to go with that? That's a question that everyone has to answer for themselves. We'll put a link in the comments below, or in the show notes here for that website. But important to recognize that when you invest just blindly, so when you look at the U.S. stock market, half of the U.S. stock market money is invested into funds. And so some of the money is invested into individual stocks. But of the money that's invested into funds, half of it is invested into what are called index funds. An index fund is something that is just, they are going out, and this is what you hear when you hear of the S&P 500, and there's other indexes as well. But they are just buying the companies. So an index fund is something that you can go buy $10 worth of an index fund, or some other amount, but you don't have. But they are going to buy an equivalent amount of shares of the companies that are that make up the S&P 500. They are trying to mirror the S&P 500 as closely as possible to that. And so all of this money, that if you're strong in your Christian values and you believe and you want to vote that way, but your investments are in these index funds that are just blindly picking, or that you then are accidentally, unintentionally invested in these companies that are some of the worst offenders of Christian faith, then that's where I want to open your eyes up to other options inside that, because the other half of the money is actively managed funds. So an index fund it's what's called passively managed, and they're just trying to mirror an index, whereas actively managed is they're going after some more tactical strategy. And so there is this thing called screening. And so screening is a way that you can assess the company to try to decide if that's the type of company that I want to actually invest in or not. There are a number of different places that you can go for this, and we'll talk about them here in just a moment. But I want to walk you through a little bit of the way that you can look at screening. And so there are a number of different companies that I'm going to talk about here. One of them that I like the tools that they have on their website the best is Inspire. And so this company called Inspire Insight, or Inspire, and then they have what they call Inspire Insight as a tool to see how to review these companies, and they score them. And so Inspire has a number of these funds that they have that are meant to mirror an index, but take out some of the worst perpetrators against the Christian faith. And some of the things that they might be screening for would be abortion activism, or let's see if I can say this right, abortifacients. That it's basically, these are active ingredients inside the drugs that are used for abortion pills, Plan B pills, and other things like that. Anything that's meant to stop life there. So those companies are the companies that make those are then hit, those are obviously, that's a ding against their rating in terms of, is this company, how aligned is this company with Christian values? Things that's, companies that support LGBT, things that, companies that participate in pornography. You look at Google. And so while Google itself doesn't necessarily produce porn, Google is a major facilitator of pornography, especially child pornography too. And so they get hit for that. Companies that are using fetal cells for vaccine production, those type of things. So anyone who's doing these things that as Christians, we would say, we don't stand for that, they're given a rating there. So you don't think that, well, I'm investing into Microsoft and Microsoft is great. And you find out that, oh, Microsoft is actually on the list of the worst offenders out there. Screening, there's also what's called positive screening. So positive screening would be things where they're looking at a company and their positive traits, what about their hiring ethics? Because obviously the ESG thing that was pushed, so politically charged, made it seem like anything that wasn't that, well, obviously those other companies didn't have ethics. That's obviously not true. That's just how it was portrayed. And so they're looking at hiring ethics, they're looking at consumer welfare, product sustainability, regulatory adherence. There's a long list of things that companies do that are positive, and then they're getting scored for that as well. And so there's negative screening. Are we just trying to screen out the bad companies? There's positive screening. Are we looking for those companies that are really strongly pushing forward Christian values there? And on Inspire, if you go to inspireinsight.com, or you go to their website, which is inspireetf.com, and then one of the tools they have is screening, you'll get to this inspireinsight.com. And there they have a long list of all of these. Well, they have data on 47,600 ticker symbols. And so you can see in here who's doing the best, who's doing the worst, and everything in between, whether we're talking about individual funds, individual securities, stocks, or if we're talking about actual funds. A lot of these things are rated. So we can see in here that Facebook, Meta, Pfizer, Google, Johnson & Johnson, Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, these are all ranked. They literally have the lowest score possible in here. And you can click on them and then find out why. Okay, so Meta is, abortion activism, exploitation, LGBT activism, pornography. And then you can click on that and they'll say, well, why is it that Facebook, is being dinged for pornography? And then you can read in here, children are regularly exposed to pornography and harmful content on Instagram, a platform owned by Meta. The UK Children's Commissioner report found that 33% of children who saw pornography saw it on Instagram, and they were ranked in the top 5 worst for every category of harm in the 2022 BARC report for severe sexual content, severe suicidal ideation, depression, body image concerns, severe bullying, hate speech, and severe violence. That's not something that you would necessarily think about when you think, oh, I'm going to invest in Facebook, because you see how well it's done. If you've paid attention to the Magnificent Seven and see how great their returns have been, they did phenomenal for portfolios. Some of these other ETFs that we're talking about, these groups, have been able to hang with them even without investing into the companies that have produced the largest gains in the S&P or in the market. And so what we want to do is I want to draw attention to the fact that there are these screeners out there that you can use to pick the type of the type of investments that you're in. And so we have these in our portfolios here, and it's something that inside your 401k you're probably not going to be able to. 401k is going to have pretty limited selection there. You can certainly make a push and a request that your 401k add something in here, especially if you work at a Christian organization. Then that makes an even stronger case for that. But for inside your IRA, this is something you should absolutely, your IRA or any other investment account that's not limited in its access, I would be making, I'm not trying to give financial advice. I would suggest you consider looking at this and talking to your financial advisor about this. But there is certainly something to be said about trying to vote with your dollars here. And as these companies, as people just invest in the S&P 500, you don't know that because of how big the Magnificent Seven, these Microsoft, Facebook, these companies are compared to the rest of the market. When you invest $100 into the S&P 500, a larger percentage of that is going to those companies who are the worst offenders. And so when you stop doing that and you start putting your money to other places, like we said, half of the money that's invested in the market just blindly goes into these index funds like that. And as well as most of the actively managed funds are going to have those big companies in there too. That when you do this, you start stripping them of their resources, and that is a meaningful deal. So where can you turn to look for something like this? First of all, I want to start with something of a kind of a beware, that not just because an investment has a good name doesn't mean it's really doing what you're hoping it's doing. Case in point here, when I was looking up for Caterpillar, I'm obviously being in Peoria here, I was trying to look at how Caterpillar scored, and Caterpillar actually scores pretty well. But the one that came up before it was, instead of CAT for Caterpillar, it was CATH, which was the Global X S&P 500 Catholic Values ETF. And in this, so if you go to inspireinsight.com and you look up this ticker symbol, CATH, you will find that they have a negative 53 on their score, and things that they have companies that have abortion activism. And so then you click on that and you'll see all the companies that are invested, that this fund invests in, that supply, that promote abortion activism. And you'll get the details as to why. So you'll see that, okay, they invest in MasterCard. MasterCard donated between $50,000 and $100,000 to Center for American Progress, which is an organization that helps state and federal lawmakers develop and enact policies to achieve equitable abortion access. So this Catholic Values ETF is I don't know if any organization is as strong against Catholicism as from the Catholics that I know they're so strong against abortion. And yet this Catholic Values ETF is invested into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh, sorry, there's more. Oh, wow. There's just 11 listed. There might be, oh my goodness, there might be 60 companies there that are failing the abortion activism test. And there's that word I couldn't say, the abortifacients, that they have these companies that they're invested in that actively make or sell these emergency contraception drugs, or embryonic stem cells, alcohol, exploitation, gambling, LGBT activism. And so they'll walk you through this and show you, okay, inside that ETF, just how well those individual securities are doing. On to ones that I think are worth looking at. So the American Conservative Values ETF is not one that's based on faith. It is based purely on political ideology. They say that they're based on the conviction that politically active companies fail to maximize their shareholder returns, as well as support issues and causes that conflict with our conservative ideals, beliefs, and values. And so if you go to their website, for the American Conservative Values ETF, you can get a pretty good fact sheet on what they're doing, why. They also have a strong boycott list of companies that they suggest that you boycott. If you are of conservative values, then they suggest that you boycott the list, or these listed companies. And it's extensive. There are 38 companies on that list there. But then you can dig in and find out why. Why are they saying that you shouldn't drink Coca-Cola or bank with JP Morgan Chase or Goldman Sachs? Don't go to Dick's Sporting Goods. Don't do Walt Disney. You probably understand that one without having to look too hard, or Target. But some of these other ones in here, you can dig into this as well. So, anyways, that's a good help for you. On the Christian standpoint, the Like I mentioned Inspire ETFs. I think they are a great place to go. One of our partners is getting closer to I think they're in a beta version now, but they're getting closer to launching Seek Invest, SEEK. Seek Invest is a biblically responsible screener. One of the people that we've had on here before, Andrew Barlow, we did a couple podcasts with him. He is with Envoy, and they have Envoy's done a really great job, because what they have said is it's so difficult to actually invest in these companies and not have the and try to keep up with the returns of what the stock market's doing while you're not investing in the highest performing companies. And so what they do is they actively trade the companies. So they look for only the companies that they are comfortable with their money going to, but then they actively trade those accounts. So they're getting in and out of those stocks on a regular basis in order to try to generate a higher return on them than you would just by buying and holding them. And so obviously there's more risk involved with that, but they've got a good track record of performing well there. And so Andrew Barlow with Envoy Financial, I would also recommend you going and looking or talking with them about what they're doing. The Ron Blue or Blue Trust is also another group of financial advisors who have a strong biblical mandate on the way that they're doing their investing. So again, that's a spot to go. I hope that's helpful to you on a different way to look at your investments. I wanted to circle back on one other thing from episode 75. We'd been talking about belief. If you haven't listened to that episode, I would ask you to do that, because there's something there that the Lord has been showing me, and I've finally brought it up on episode 75, but I've continued to sit with the Lord even more of this, and he's showing me more and more of the just what he had in mind with that version of belief. And before we finish up here, I just wanted to share one addition to that. We were talking amongst our men's group about how come when Paul in his letters, how come he doesn't talk near as much about these things, what it looks like to believe, like Jesus did when he said in John 14:12 or Mark 16, when he was talking about these are the signs that will accompany those who believe. And so I was just in Acts this morning, and in Acts 19, read this piece here, which just stuck out at me. I want to share it. Chapter 19, verse 11. God did extraordinary miracles through Paul, so that even handkerchiefs and aprons that had touched him were taken to the sick, and their illnesses were cured, and the evil spirits left them. So Paul, in all of his stuff that I have seen on his version or his talk about salvation, always goes back to belief still. He belief is always woven in that, and inside of that belief, even though Paul isn't necessarily talking as much about the miracles, at least that I've encountered so far, since I've been looking through this lens, he is still very clearly practicing the miracles and seeing incredible moves of God, and how that helps confirm the word, and which aligns exactly with what Jesus said in Mark 16. So leave you that, and we'll hope you keep on digging into that for yourself. And we will be back next week with Josh Fongert to talk about business consulting.
Thank you again for listening to Wealth Well Done. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player, and together we'll continue to improve our relationship with money and our effectiveness in stewarding it well.